So today we're going to be making a holiday poinsettia wreath, and we're going to be making this out of paper. So I'm going to go over the supplies that I use for this project. First and foremost, you're going to want to have a Cricut machine. You can ultimately do this project with any of the Cricut machines, even the Joy. If you're using the Joy, you would just have to cut less petals out at a time, but you can use any Cricut machine. I am using the Cricut Maker 3 today. The Explorer 2, the original Maker, and the Explorer 3 will all work as well. You will also need to have a cutting mat on hand. You can use the standard grip green mat, or you could even use the light blue light grip mat. You'll also want to have a wood dowel on hand, which we are going to be using to curl our flower petals and our holly leaves. I have some ribbon here, which I'll be using to hang my wreath up with, and I have a wreath foam base here. I also have some crepe paper here, which I will be using to wrap the base of the wreath in. And then of course we have our cardstock. I am using a 65-pound weighted cardstock in reds, pinks, and greens for our holiday wreath. You can purchase this at craft stores. Cricut.com has lots of cardstock that is great, that works with their machines. And you can also check out places online as well that will sell 65-pound cardstock. For the center of our poinsettias, I'm going to be using some pearls to adorn the center. These are just 12 mil pearls here. You can use 8 or 12 mil pearls. They work great for the center. You will also see me use my paper bloom shaping mat and tool set, which is going to help us kind of cup the center of our poinsettia flowers so that the petals are going to stand up, and it's going to add a lot of life and dimension to them. So you're going to see me feature that a few times as well, but it is optional. All of the craft files that I am featuring today are part of the Cricut Access Design Library. So if you want to use them, then make sure you follow the link below in this video description, or scroll up to the supply section if you're in the blog post, and you will be able to find the links to those exact images that I used in Cricut Access on Cricut Design Space's website. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started cutting out our templates. Once our machine is flashing, go ahead and press the mat against the rollers and push that double arrow button, and your machine will receive the mat. It'll take a moment to scan the mat and material, and then it will flash the play or the Cricut icon button to go ahead and proceed with the cut. Right, one of my cuts is done here, and whenever you're removing cardstock from your Cricut mat, you always want to flip the mat over and then remove the cardstock by peeling the mat away from your material instead of your material away from your mat. And that's going to help eliminate the curling, especially if you're dealing with like a really fresh mat. So that's really important to make sure that we're not shaping our paper before we're ready to. So I've also cut a bunch of greenery out here. I got some holly and some berries and some evergreen here. So I'm just going to add a little life to these. First with the holly here, I'm going to add a little bit of glue right to the inside and ever so slightly overlap. You don't want to do it a lot, otherwise it's going to make your leaves stand up at a really awkward angle, but just enough so that it's not completely flat. And then with our pine here, I'm just going to roll this. So it's a little bit on the thick side for this paper, but it still works great because if you roll it nice and tight, you don't even have to really glue it, it just stays rolled, and then once you attach it to your wreath, it'll be good to go. So kind of like that, and you can, you know, fan it out a little bit if you want. Very simple, like that. And then I have some of these evergreen branches here, and I'm just folding them up, kind of pinching them at the bottom there, and I'll be adding those onto the wreath as well. Okay, and then for the little berries here, we could add some glue, and I am using hot glue for most of this, but because of the delicate nature of these berries, I did grab some liquid glue here. This is just an aqua clear Tombow liquid glue that I like to use. And I'm going to place my little berries here right on top and set that aside to dry with the rest of them. So starting with my green base here for assembling the poinsettia, I'm going to take my Cricut scraper tool and I'm just going to crease each one down the center. And I'm just using that Cricut scraper tool as a bit of a helper to give it a nice crisp crease down the center. You can just use your fingers too if you want. All right, there we go. Now for the next 3 pieces here, this main base one that's similar to the green, and then these 2 slightly larger ones here, I'm going to be curling them with a thin wood dowel. This is a 1/4 inch wood dowel. You can also use a spare glue stick if you do not have a wood dowel on hand and you're using hot glue like I am, then a spare glue stick can work well in a pinch. Repeating the same thing here. Okay, and we'll get to these 2 smaller ones in just a moment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my paper bloom shaping mat and tool set, and this is optional, but I just wanted to show you how to use it in this video here. You don't need to do anything for the green part, but for this part here, I'm going to press right in the center and roll a little bit. And what this is doing is getting the paper to stand up so that it's not so flat. So I'm going to do that with these pieces here. And if you don't have this, then you could just bend them up. I just find in my experience that this works a little better because it's actually sort of curving and cupping the paper, which is going to mean it's going to hold its placement a lot better. And for these smaller center pieces here, I am going to do the same thing, except instead of curling with the dowel, I'm just going to press at the center and cup the petals a little bit. Alright, so now to assemble, we're going to start with the largest poinsettia piece here, and I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue right on the back side. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to place it right into the center there, and you want to aim for the green to be alternating between the red so you can clearly see it through the red there. And then we're going to move on to the next one. And you just want to kind of spin it until you get it kind of aesthetically pleasing to your eye. Because there's 3 points here and there's 5 points here, you won't be able to perfectly alternate it, and that's okay because that's kind of the look we're going for with our poinsettia. Once you go to add this 3rd red piece on here, you do want to aim to alternate. So you can see here, these 3 are falling in between these 3. Alright, and then for our center here, I'm going to glue the smallest one inside the slightly larger one. Okay, just like that. And then remember I said I was going to use a pearl to adorn the center. So I'm going to add that pearl in. Okay, and then we'll add this whole center right into our poinsettia to complete it. There we go, there is our poinsettia, and you can open up the center just a little bit once it's in there if you want. Now, the amount you put on your wreath is going to completely depend on your preference. So I'm going to aim for about 6 here, and I might change my mind depending on how my wreath comes together, but that's what I'm starting with, is 3 slightly smaller ones and 3 slightly larger ones. So to prep my base here, I'm going to take some crepe paper, and I'm going to take it in a complementary green color. And I'm going to first cut some of this down. I have this folded over a couple of times because I want to cut a long thin strip that I can stretch and wrap around the wreath. Alright, so now I have this long strip of crepe paper here, and I'm going to stretch it because we all know that crepe paper has that nice stretch to it. So now that I have some crepe paper to work with here, I'm going to pick a spot on the wreath. It's my starting point. I'm just going to pick right up here where the wreath meets together. I'm going to glue it at a slight angle on the inside, and I'm going to start wrapping. Alright, so now our wreath is ready to have all of our items added to it. I'm going to start with the leaves, and I'm going to be gluing them all around the wreath. And as I glue these, I'm going to alternate the colors that I have, and I'm going to be placing a little glue right onto the inside and putting them face down like so. A little bit of a press. You might need to hold it for a second or two to let that glue catch. Alright, so now I have my first set of leaves on, and next I'm going to start adding some leaves along the inner rim here just to fill it out so that we don't see the crepe paper from the side angle. Alright, so now that I have lots of leaves put onto my wreath base here, it's time to add our poinsettias. And how you add your poinsettias is going to be completely up to your preference. What I'm planning on doing here is I'm planning on clustering them in two different areas. So I have 3 slightly larger poinsettias, and then I have 3 slightly smaller ones. And I plan on clustering 2 of the slightly smaller ones with 1 large, and then vice versa with the other set. And I'm going to kind of do them sort of catty corner from each other on the wreath. So it'll be kind of a nice balance of the poinsettias on the wreath. Now you could just sort of randomize them and go around, or even add them all at the top if you wanted, but that's really your choice. So I'm going to start gluing these down. So anywhere where you glue these down, you are going to need to push the leaves down a little bit more and probably tack those down with some glue before you start adding the poinsettias on top, just so that it's not fighting you to put the glue down on it. So pick your spot. All right, so I'm going to grab one of my larger ones and I'm going to glue it right there, and I'm just going to place fairly generous amount of glue right in the center of the poinsettia, and then place it down onto the wreath. Might want to hold it there for a moment or two until the glue starts to set up. And I'm going to add one on each side over here. So I think I'm going to glue this down a little bit better, like that. Next, I'm going to work on taking my little pine tree sprigs and working those in around the wreath as well. I'm going to focus on keeping them all going kind of the same direction as the leaves so it looks very symmetrical. And I'm just going to tack those in. So with these, what I like to do is I sort of push the base of it together, pinching it so it becomes a little more flat, and then I can add a little bit of glue and tuck it right behind a leaf there. Alright, so I'm going to continue to fill this wreath out now. I've added my little pine tree sprigs here. I'm going to add some of my evergreen in as well. I'm just taking these and folding them up, and then I'm going to gently tack them again underneath the leaves. I'm probably going to go kind of in between these that I just added on to add these in to kind of fill it out that much more. Just adding a little bit of glue, kind of tuck it right there under one of those holly leaves. You can't really see where it starts. I'm also going to work on adding my berry sprigs in. I'm just going to work them in where I feel like there's a good spot and empty space for them. Again, just tacking with a little bit of hot glue, or you can even use some liquid glue. These are a little more delicate, so liquid glue can sometimes be the better option, but hot glue also works just fine. And the berries are really great because it brings out the red in the poinsettias and kind of unites the entire design together. And if you're doing a different color poinsettia, then you could do a matching berry color. So perhaps if you're doing a white poinsettia, you could do white berries. If you're doing gold poinsettias, you could do gold berries, or pink berries, and it will kind of ties the entire design together really nicely. Alright, so I've added everything to my wreath here. I'm really happy with the way it looks, and you would just continue adding your greenery and such until you're satisfied with it. So you could make this, of course, a lot fuller if you wanted to, or you could just stop here. You could even make it a little bit less. I did a rather large wreath here. This is like a 14-inch wreath, so it took a lot to fill it out, so I'm happy with it as it is. And the last step now is going to be to add a ribbon to the back in order to hang our wreath up. So I'm just going to use a white ribbon for this. You could use baker's twine, you could use any other color ribbon, you could use a thinner ribbon. I'm using a slightly thicker ribbon here. But what I plan to do is just trim a little bit down. And then I plan to fold the ribbon in half here. And then I'm going to loop it around, tie a knot. And I don't want the ribbon to really like stick up really high, so I'm making the knot kind of close to the loop. So you can see the loop here is rather small, just enough to hook onto something. And I have a lot of extra ribbon here I really don't need, so I'm gonna trim that down. I'm gonna flip my wreath over here gently. Just let it sit gently like that. And then you'll want to glue or tack this ribbon right here. I am going to opt to glue it. If you wanted to, you could also add a pin to reinforce the glue. It could be a good idea, especially if your wreath happens to be maybe on the bigger side or heavier side. It could be a good option. And then if you do want to cover this up a little bit more, what you could do is just take some crepe paper and cut down to size. Alright, our wreath is now finished and ready to be hung up, so let's go hang up our wreath.